Welcome to the final Women Talking Wellness of 2020. Oh, it feels quite momentous, doesn't it? Over the last 10, 12 weeks, I think, we've had the privilege of hearing from some really wonderful speakers coming on to share personal stories as well as their depth and breadth of knowledge across a wide variety of subjects. Now, replay folks, just saying a quick welcome to you and a reminder to say hi in the comments and let me know that you're tuned in and show this conversation some love with a thumbs up or a little heart just to let us know that you're there. Tonight, we finish with a flourish. Women Talking Wellness quite literally ends on a high note. Well, at least there might be some notes towards the end of the conversation. My guest this evening has had a career that's so far seen her working extensively across the United States and in Europe. She's been a director, a producer, as well as an accomplished soprano singer. She's particularly driven to tell female led stories and to use her work as a director to highlight the forgotten women writers, composers, and heroes of all sorts. As a singer, she's learned to use her voice and her body to take ownership of the stage, big or small. Now, you don't have to be a singer or indeed even into opera to enjoy tonight's conversation. If you struggle to find your voice at times, if you feel shy, insignificant perhaps, like your voice just doesn't matter, tonight's conversation is where you want to be. So please give a very warm internet welcome to my guest this evening on Women Talking Wellness, Charlotte McKechnie. Welcome to you, Miss Charlotte.
Thank you, Lorna. Thank you for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure. I've been wanting you to come on this for such a long time, so it's a joy to have you here. So, as I just said a few moments ago, Charlotte is not only a performer, but she also works behind the scenes. In fact, more of her work now is focused on behind the scenes stuff. But I'd love you, Charlotte, just to introduce yourself and let people know how you got on this journey, because I'm guessing that there's not a lot of kids are sitting at home at, 6 or 7 years old. What do you want to be when you grow up? I'd love to be a soprano opera singer. So I'd love to know the story. How did you get into all of this?
I started very, very young. I started acting when I was about 3, with Scottish Youth Theatre, and I was playing the cat in The Enormous Turnip, and I, I harbored some resentment for longer than I should of being cast as the cat and not the turnip, and it was a harsh beginning to the virtual casting world.
Who
Um,
doesn't want to be the
and
turnip?
it took me a long time to realize casting wasn't personal. I still struggle with the concept, even though now I'm on much of the time on the other side of the table.
Indeed.
But I really jumped into a singing performance with the STV Child's Christmas, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful. This was when I was 5, before YouTube. I'm deeply grateful that this cannot be searched anywhere in the internet and is on VHS tapes. But yeah, essentially it was a nationwide search for a small female singer and to do this TV show, and they chose me, and that's how I started, certainly in film and television. And soon afterwards, I realized that I really found myself very much on stage, but also I really enjoyed competitions. And so I joined the Royal Scottish National Orchestra Junior Chorus from about 7, and I trained really intensely with them for 10 years, and with the RSNO Orchestra itself, and then transitioned into other orchestra performances as well. I was really, really lucky to win BBC Chorister of the Year when I was 15, which was a wonderful, kind of crazily wonderful platform to do much more radio work, and work as a soloist with different orchestras around the UK. I was basically not in school for that year and the time afterwards, but they were very understanding. But I discovered early on that I was always very comfortable talking to adults and talking to strangers in general, but didn't hugely get on. Not, I didn't get on. I was quieter with children my own age and felt much more reserved, certainly as a child and teenager, but really found that sense of agency and personal ownership and just power really from a very, very young age when I was on stage. And particularly I spent a lot of time in the Theatre Royal stage when I was a very, very young child, which is such a gargantuan space to a small child. And it felt so, it was such a different sense of removal from my ordinary life, being on this very, very large stage and having the autonomy to really open up and own it in a way that I didn't feel that I could do in my regular life in school and in my other hobbies. So that's really what gravitated me towards it. And then when I kept performing after winning Young Chorister, and when I went to university, I made the conscious choice to go to America rather than staying in the UK, and I did a lot of operas and musicals in my undergraduate career. I did about 3 a semester, so yeah, it was a lot. But my degree was in history, not in music. So I really expanded there, and when I graduated, my first job out of university was as the managing director of the Juventus New Music Ensemble, which is a Boston-based classical chamber and opera company that produces and promotes emerging composers in the classical genre. So it was a truly wonderful and terrifying slightly experience of, going from spending all my time on the stage to being the person on the other side of the table and really facilitating these performances to happen. And I produced my first world premiere opera when I was in that role. I helped launch the Boston New Music Festival, which brought together 30 organizations from across the city in a week's long set of performances. And I also I'd done a bit of directing in university, and in hindsight, I'd started directing much earlier with my cousins on holiday, which I kind of remember later. I would bully them to do different, I'd create essentially scenes, performances pulling from different musicals and then direct them in that. I believe they were willing most of the time. But there's a strong culture in opera, especially with young artists trying to get established, of needing to do summer programs in order to get the roles on their resume. But a lot of them are what we'd call pay to sing. So you're paying sometimes, or mostly, about $4,000 in order to take part in the program and get the roles. And when I was applying to them and looking at the fees that I was going to have to pay, I really didn't want to, and thought, why can't I just do my own? And when trying to come up with a theme of it, I landed on female composers, and so I put together the first year. It was an opera scenes performance in a refurbished swimming pool theatre, and it was in July, which is extremely hot month in Massachusetts. It's very, very, very warm. It's about 33 degrees with humidity, and we had these 2 giant fans. But yeah, then the audience and cast were real stalwarts. But beginning that journey really hammered home to me how infrequently composers that happen to be women are performed,
right.
professionally or otherwise. There was a study that in the 2017 to 2018 repertoire, only 3% of operas performed were by women, and they were also nearly all operas by women currently living, so in the contemporary genre. And I'm a huge proponent of contemporary music, having run Juventus, and continuing to commission today. But there is such a wealth of repertoire and of pieces that women have been composing for hundreds of years, and it seemed to me a great disservice to leave this legacy unacknowledged. Right. So that's why I set up my company, which is now New Voices Theatre, and we alternate between doing a historic and a contemporary opera, again by a female composer, really to firstly champion young and emerging talent that's coming out today, but also to educate the public and even the profession about these creators with very, very rich work throughout the centuries, and to try and hopefully get second, third performances for them and get them into repertoire.
It's interesting. I'm sitting here racking my brains even now. I mean, I come from a very musical family. I was brought up around classical, contemporary, all different genres of music, and I am really hard pushed to think of one female composer. I can't bring a name to mind at all, which is shocking.
Yeah, I mean, you might have heard of Mahler as a very illustrious symphonic composer. His wife Alma Mahler was also a really superb pianist and composer whom he forbade to get her music published. Clara Schumann, also a very, very wonderful pianist and composer, of course, relative to the famous Robert Schumann. So there were oftentimes with the men that we have tended to become more familiar with, there are often equally very talented either wives or sisters who often were actually very successful concert pianists in their time. Nadia Boulanger or Clara Schumann being notable examples, but whose legacy just hasn't lasted in the same way as their male relatives. In terms of why they're currently left out of repertoire, I mean, I will, acknowledge it's harder to source the manuscripts. A lot of them are either in pieces or have been burned, or just, aren't complete, or they're in an archive very, very deep down. But a lot of them are there. And there's been some really, really wonderful work, particularly by SUNY, the State University of New York, and the Composer Diversity Forum, in highlighting female composers. And they've also done a terrific job of widening their database of composers of color and non-binary composers, to try and make it easier for producers to access this music. The Rebecca Clark Society have done the same thing. It was actually through their funding that allowed me to put on the second show, I guess, of New Voices, and really allowed it to take off. Their president came to the show initially as a reviewer, and then asked me, what do you need? What amount do you need to make this work again? Which is the question every producer and director dreams of hearing. I sadly have not heard it since, but I I look forward to the next person coming at me with a blank check. And so it was that support that really helped us launch.
Amazing. Well, you talked earlier. You've been performing since such an early age. But what I find most interesting is how you seem to feel much more at home on the stage than in what you would consider the real world. And I think that a lot of how you've kind of built up your persona is quite relevant to people, out there kind of trying to live their lives just now. We were talking months and months ago. I remember a conversation that you and I had, and we were discussing how it's very common for women in particular. It's not exclusive to women, but it's common for women not to fill up a space when they walk into it. Their posture, the use of their voice, the way that they interact is often almost kind of apologetic in some way, because as women, I think we've kind of been brought up in that sort of, we're supposed to always be very polite, and we're supposed to be a little bit quieter and sort of in the background. And I would be really interested in how the things that you learned to take control of a stage in the theatre, how can that translate into the world around us?
So much of it can translate. I think you're totally right in that so much of our subconsciously conditioned body language, particularly as women, but not necessarily exclusively, is to do with shutting down, and as in shutting down space physically. And I remember one of the first or kind of most notable pieces of acting advice I got was, I think I'd come into rehearsal and my legs were crossed, and maybe my arms were maybe not crossed, but at least kind of on my lap in front of me. And the acting coach, who was also a singing coach, immediately pointed out that the way my limbs were crossed, and for performing, whether that's singing or acting or really any way in which you were using your voice, posture is really, really important. So so good posture for that would be, having an open shoulders. And my most recent singing lessons are still, I get reminded about this, not to round my shoulders or take in any kind of space, but we're looking for as much breadth across the chest as possible, not dragging back, not holding back, but really feeling that sense of expansion. And firstly, our spines and our skeletons are going to thank us greatly 20, 30 years down the line, because moving in the way that our bodies are designed is just going to help us, even if we are mute. But especially if we use our voice and have to engage, not even with the public, but just with our colleagues, even with our family members and our friends, the way that we set up our bodies says a huge amount about our mentality and our message to the world, and really what we think about ourselves. I mean, there have been a lot of studies to say that the principal communication comes through body language. So that's the benefits of the singing, or just speaking, musical theatre, performance, posture in general, really, really translates to anything that we're looking to do as humans. And so apart from thinking of that sense of openness, and maybe if people did like one ballet lesson or something, the classic thinking there's a string out of the crown of your head, pressing it up like I've heard of it described as a swan neck recently. I don't know if I buy into that image, but certainly that idea of elongation, I do very much agree with. And yeah, so having our head centered, you'll actually pull me up on it in this call. I have a habit of slightly tilting my head off center, which really isn't good, because our head is really quite heavy, and it should be properly balanced on our spinal column, which is how our skeletons are designed. Why do I do that? I think when I was 7, I thought it was something that people, I don't really know, but it's my responsibility now to correct it. So yes, head placement, feeling the sense of, again, space, expansion, freedom. I'm trying to not use words like holding or pushing back. I know I've definitely heard people think of drawing your shoulder blades together. I don't hate that, as long as you're not really, really tensing, because then it gets really hard to speak. I mean, that's a bit hyperbolic, but still. And in terms of if we were standing and walking around, making sure, again, that we have that clear, we essentially want a straight line between our heads, our shoulders, our
Knees
hips,
and toes.
and our knees and our toes. Yeah. Didn't quite put the hips into that song, but otherwise, yes. And it's the same if one is thinking about acrobatics or dance, and it's all about what these disciplines have in common, which isn't as random as it sounds. As you know, I also work in circus now, and it always seems very strange to people that I would combine circus and opera, or circus and classical song, as I'm doing in my next project. But I see so many similarities in each discipline harnessing the power of the body, and the ownership that we can find in ourselves through how we use the body in these disciplines that are about finding our extremes. I don't say pushing ourselves to the extremes, but really, really finding them.
There's an interesting a study that I read years ago, but it was also I think quite a famous TED talk as well, and the researcher was named Amy Cuddy, and her research was based around how you can change your attitude, your emotional state by changing your posture. And there's been a lot of discussion around, do your emotions change because of your posture, or can you change your posture because of your emotions? It's a really interesting, kind of subject. But certainly, I think there's a lot of evidence behind how we carry ourselves, and because we live in this society, especially in the West, we are just permanently hunched over our phones, computers. We sit constantly. In fact, we don't just sit. For all of those of you that are watching right now, I want you just to take a little look at how you're actually watching. Are you kind of slouched on the couch as you listen, or like what's happening in your spine? Because there's so many unconscious behaviors that they're just patterns in our body, and they can really affect our confidence, our ability to just to feel good in our own body. And it really is as simple as if you're watching at home just now, try and feel a happy thought. Amy's just said no comment. I see you, Amy. I'll see you on Tuesday for yoga. Try and think a happy thought while you're curled up and hunched over. Try and put a smile on your face when you do that. It's actually really hard to do it. You want to change your attitude, change your outlook. You've got to sit up, you've got to open your shoulders. As you just said, Charlotte, you have to create space throughout the front of the body. Sally is one of our regular listeners. Welcome as always, Sally. And it's funny, Sally, I was thinking that it was your wedding this Saturday. I knew it was soon. But Sally has just said it's the wedding this Saturday, and I'm terrified. Being the center of attention when I was drinking, but now I hate it. Any advice? Hiding in my bed for the last half hour. Sally, no. I'm feeling really scared, but it's coming out of anger. Well, Sally, we need to give you some advice, I think. um, she does quantify that. She says she's lying in bed because she's totally knackered trying to go over a chest infection. Well, that's allowed, Sally. That's
Definitely.
not a problem. You rest is really important. But Charlotte, I wonder if is there something that Sally can do with her voice? Because our voice is such a powerful thing. This whole talk is called Your Powerful Voice. Is there something that
Mm.
she could do using her powerful voice to maybe shift out of this anxiety that she's got around the wedding coming up?
Firstly, congratulations. And I would start with the breath and the body, actually. The majority of classical singing masterclasses are maybe not the majority in silence, but it's a lot of breathing. And because our breathing is firstly how we're setting up our sound. And so for example, maybe not as applicable here, but if the way that we breathe in for a phrase impacts the way that we will then sing that phrase. So if I'm in a singing an aria and the upcoming sentence phrase is very, very angry or something of a very, very high emotion, then still doing it healthily with like a loose jaw and sense of openness, but I would be more. My singing teacher would kill me if she saw that because it was very high, but we're going to ignore that. We're going to ignore that. But the idea is setting ourselves up in the way that we want to continue. So if one's looking to lead with, I might presume, confidence and a sense of calm and self-possession, breathing exercises, I would definitely start there. I would also start everything that you're about, all the if there is walking in, I was going to say costume, in the dress, or particularly the shoes, even if it's just the shoes, I would practice that in advance. It's a big thing to make sure that as much as we can, as opera singers, can have our character shoes in the weeks beforehand to learn the role, because it really affects, especially if we're women and wearing different kinds of high heels, it really affects spinal alignment and body alignment, which has a huge knock-on effect to how we need to think about engaging our voice and engaging our body. So I would definitely recommend rehearsing in the shoes, and even by standing in them and breathing in particularly deeply. I know in yoga, Lorna, correct me if I'm wrong, yoga teachers talk about belly breathing, which would definitely be a good place to start if you're already familiar with that concept. I would add something else to think about, which is maybe kind of trying to breathe through your back, which I do appreciate sounds a bit odd, but it's, and I really should have tried to practice the how the camera would do this. Lorna, tell me if you can and cannot see this, but it's the idea of,
We're good.
So if my hands are around my waist right now, I'm looking to push out both my hands in either direction. And so what we get in yoga a lot is thinking of expanding this way, which is good, and we definitely want to keep that. But I'd also think even more about expanding this way. So I think, is it your kidneys there, Lorna? I think it is. But anyway,
Sure.
we have here really feeling the breath. I like to think of it, if I had lights, like car lights here, and I'm shooting the light right down to the floor in a kind of 60-ish degrees. So my breath is coming this way and that way, and it's a very, it really, really connects you to your body very efficiently. and makes your oxygen work even more effectively for you. And what else?
Charlotte, can Sally do that exercise if she's lying in bed? Or is it better if she's standing up?
You can do it lying in bed if you're actually, so essentially, like, if you can mimic as much as possible, you know, if we're standing with a straight body, we can lie in bed with a straight body as well. Yeah. So just, I mean, I wouldn't do it kind of, you know, that half sitting up when you're kind of like this, which is, in fairness, is completely how, as a confession, I have written several grants this week. So I'm not saying that I'm perfect in this. But yeah, I would say lying almost, I think, coffin. Oh, maybe not coffin style, but what do you do at the end of yoga with the deep breathing?
Shavasana.
Shavasana.
So
yes,
you just want to have your spine and your joints in line. So we can do it lying in bed. You just don't want to have your head propped up on pillows if you're going to do that. So definitely worth. Sally's just said that she's still finding it hard because of the chest infection. So if you want to help that chest infection, Sally, there's a couple of things that I'm going to say to you. Forgive me, Charlotte. I'm just going to jump over on this one for a second. There is a video on YouTube that I can send you a link to. It is all about the lung energy meridian. Really, really useful. It takes about 10, maybe 15 minutes. It's something that will help to strengthen and support your lungs. So if you're getting over a chest infection, that will really help. If you can find the energy and you don't have to move out of bed, follow what Charlotte's just said and use that little exercise where you've got your hands and you're trying to move the breath into the back of your body as well as the front of it. The better quality of breath you have, the more you boost your immune system, the more you increase your circulation, you improve your both your red blood cell and your white blood cell count. There's lots of really good stuff that happens. So breathing is your best friend. Breathing also has a direct effect on your central nervous system, which again, Charlotte and I were going to talk about in a few minutes. It connects to your central nervous system, which helps to just bring you down and reset you for that kind of rest and digest phase rather than being in that anxious, kind of fear stage. So breathing, I think, at the moment is your best friend. The fact that you're saying that you've got a bit of vertigo and tinnitus, there's lots of stuff going on there, and it could very well be that you're carrying lots of emotions in your body. And the best way to release emotion is to breathe it out. And I know at times when you're feeling a bit fearful, and again, Charlotte, I'm sure you can relate to this when you're preparing to stand on stage in front of an audience and give a performance. We all feel anxiety about different things. We all have different levels of anxiety throughout our lives. But the common factor, whether you're going to stand in front of 10,000 people and do a show, or whether you're going to stand in front of your friends and family at your wedding, the common thread running through this is to take a deep breath, to stand tall, to stand with your body in alignment, because that's where your power comes from. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I would give a caveat because I completely forgot immediately that you're recovering from a chest infection. I'm really sorry. Do be careful about the deep breathing in that instance, because we don't want to trigger a coughing fit, and I hope you get better soon. But it can be, if you want, you could also absolutely do that, if you felt like sitting up rather than standing, as long as you're sitting up straight, it's absolutely possible. But I would definitely focus on the rest first, and then it'll all fall into place.
Yeah.
Visualization can also be really helpful. If you visualize the different stages that you're going to do. I have no idea if there's an aisle to walk down or what it might look like, but if you visualize executing whatever the steps are successfully, it really does make a difference in mentally preparing you.
Something that you've had a huge amount of experience of, obviously as a performer, you're used to getting yourself is it still cool to say in the zone? Is that a really old fashioned thing to say?
I don't know if it's old
Say
fashioned.
in
I think it's
the zone. Showing my age now. But you know how to get yourself into that mindset for performance. But one of the things that you are more involved in now, of course, as a producer and a director, is guiding others and ensuring that your own performers are in the right frame of mind. They are confident, relaxed, and ready to give a solid performance. What sort of techniques do you employ to make sure that your performers are ready when they hit that stage?
I would say the biggest thing is the preparation of the rehearsal process and making sure that we're always that in setting up a production schedule, I'm leaving enough time for things to either go wrong or take longer, or not be able to track down a bass drum for several days, which happened once. You wouldn't believe how expensive hiring a bass drum is. And in leadership in general across all types of genres, how I personally compose myself and the way that I articulate my thoughts and desires and react to any issues that have come up on show day, which happens, and that's why I love live theatre. That has a huge impact on how the performers, or indeed anyone that I was managing, really reacts and takes it in. I noticed that particularly once, actually, when I was in a choir and I was on the other side, and we had a fairly new to the game conductor who, when the piece got off a little bit, not dreadfully, not so that the audience would have realized at all, but the ship wasn't sailing as smoothly as it might, and he looked really not really uncertain, but he did not look happy, shall we say. He didn't look happy, and he didn't look optimally confident. And I will never forget how much that shook me as a member of the choir, and how much it made me realize with conductors and directors, if they're, especially when they have 150 piece orchestras and then 150 piece choir in front of them, or directors with several different choruses, or film crews with different different sets and different sets of actors and extras. The huge extent to which the psychology and the physical presentation of owning the space and having that sense of confident power, and that it would all be okay, made such a difference. So I guess in a roundabout way, I would employ the same tactics that I would use myself as a performer in any type of management that I do, and it's certainly something that I would recommend for anyone in a management position, whether you're managing symphonic players or call center workers, or anyone in between.
Yeah, no, very good. So, Charlotte, we've talked about our breathing. We've talked a little bit about posture this evening. We've talked about all the sort of physical things that we can do to improve our confidence and just how we feel in our own skin. But we are here to talk tonight about your powerful voice. Now, I'm sure that there's lots of people who are watching today that are thinking, I don't always have the most powerful voice. How often have you been in a presentation, or let's be honest, we're all in Zoom calls right now. Have you ever been in that Zoom call where you really want to speak up and say something, and it comes out as this sort of pitiful croak or this high-pitched squeak, and that's not how it sounded in your head. Your voice doesn't quite match. the,
Yep.
how do we tap into this powerful voice that we all have in us? We all have this ability to use. Some of us definitely have more powerful voices than others. But your powerful voice isn't about speaking more loudly. There's a big difference between power and volume. Power doesn't mean you're the loudest person. I think there's a differentiation between those two. Power, there's something when someone speaks with authority and when someone speaks with confidence, there is a different note in their voice. There's a different sound that I think comes out of a person. How do we do it? How do we find that?
I think you might kick me off this call if I say breathing again. But so apart from that, after that actual setup, I would firstly practice by yourself alone in a room. And actually, one of the great things about technology is one can set up a Zoom meeting where, it's just, I could set up one where it's just me and record myself and play it back, or do it with a voice memo on my phone or something, or another recording device. And that freedom in a technology capacity allows us to play and to really experiment. So firstly, because a lot of people don't necessarily realize what we sound like until we accidentally replay a voice a voicemail message or something, and nearly always hate it. That might be just me. But so I think after one has practiced those deeper breath and deeper connection to the body, I would start by humming or by doing and that's because it's impossible to do a v or a b or a b or a r. R's can be hard for people, but definitely a v, making a like V for Volvo. It's impossible to do that and not support with your abdominals. Your abs are your best friend when it comes to projecting sound, and I don't mean that you need to have a six-pack. You absolutely don't. I promise you I don't have a six-pack.
So I'm just laughing at that and thinking, I don't know how I've got such a powerful voice if your abs are important.
But if you think, oh, actually, so going off of laughter, like the best, if you're speaking and you feel your throat's getting tight, it probably is getting tight, but the best remedy to that is laughter. And conversely, and very tragically, one of the worst ways or most effective ways of tightening the cords is by crying or by tearing up. So laughter truly is the best remedy in that regard. It would be a bit odd to start laughing in a presentation just before you're about to make a key point. But hey, we're back to the practicing by yourself. So yeah, try. Doesn't have you doesn't the note that you do it on doesn't matter, or it could be spoken, I guess. And it's impossible to do that without feeling some kind of engagement just below your belly button, and it's the same muscles that we'd use when we're laughing.
I'm sitting up.
When we're blowing out a candle. Yeah, see, false combat posture. Yeah.
So what are we doing? Putting my teeth on my bottom lip. Was that what you were doing?
Yes, making like, as you were saying, like Volvo or Victor.
Oh, like a oh, okay.
It should be tickly.
Yeah, no, it is. Oh no, I feel it in my tummy. It's that action of like coughing or sneezing. Yes. Same kind of sensation. Yeah. Rachel's just says, yes, I've tried it. Well, did you feel it in your abs? And Amy, Amy's just said, I've seen you plank, Lorna. You defo have abs. You can come back, Amy. Thanks very much. Oh, I like that. That felt really good.
And start to play. I think we don't spend enough time, myself actually included, in just playing around with what our voice has to offer. So yeah, start with that, and also, especially if you're in the car with the windows up, and so it's a sound bubble, or there's no one else in the house, play around with higher pitches, or just sorry, I probably should have given a warning. I don't know what that did to your microphone. But
do you know what? No, I'm just laughing and thinking, I don't think I've ever made a sound like that in my life, Charlotte. Like, well, I would like to.
I'm not saying you have to experiment now, and everyone will have, maybe not everyone's as high, but maybe they can do lower pitches that I don't have. So just, taking just for 5 minutes. Don't immediately jump in to do this for half an hour. You will get tired because the voice is a muscle. Well, I mean, the vocal cords they're not muscles, but around them is a lot of very small, very complexly arranged muscles. And so we don't evolve learning to either speak for a long time or sing for a long time overnight. So, teachers who are speaking to classes, 5 classes a day, if they're going to do that and not be vocally tired at the end, possibly subconsciously build it up over time. So starting, with one class in their teacher training, and then ultimately building it up. Or I might imagine the first week after summer holidays would probably be particularly brutal, unless you are doing a lot of presentations over the summer holiday. I mean, even singers, if we've had, there's the stereotype of singers being very precious about their voice and about colds and things like that, but it really takes about 100 days for us to recover after a cough, and in order to get back to full capacity. And if I'm really, if I'm training for a role that's going to be about 2 hours of constant singing, I couldn't just jump in to do 2 hours of singing a day if I wasn't.
Well, it's no different than someone going to the gym and expecting to be able to run a marathon after the first day, is it? You've got to build up.
It's marathon.
Yeah, and it is, as you say, it's a set of very very small and very precise muscles that are having to be strengthened and honed, I think is the correct word, isn't it?
Yeah, very much. But breathe and play. And also, in terms of when you were saying, the initial prompt of wanting to communicate effectively in a Zoom meeting or in any other scenario, I would focus on the consonants, or just make sure you're finishing each word, and especially that you're getting all the way to the end of the sentence and really landing that final consonant, because what many people tend to do will be to start off a sentence really strongly and then tail away by the end of it. And so the sound is going like this, and it really, even though the people on the call will, or in the meeting, we will be able to piece together what you have said, but it makes a tremendous difference to the impact, the emotional impact of your comment or presentation, or however long or short it is, if you really land the final consonant of that final word. And if it is if it is a presentation, really don't be afraid to take space at the beginning and at the end. When I was in the finals of a business competition last year, and the clock, you had 60 seconds to present your pitch, and there was a giant clock on the wall which went down, and you got disqualified if you didn't stop right on the buzzer. And the clock started as soon as you started speaking, and I was very, very aware to walk onto the stage and really plant myself and make eye contact with several people in the room, then take a deep breath and start. And at the very end, after I was thanking them, again taking a minute to acknowledge your quote unquote audience, and then go out. So you never have to rush. Unless you're rushing out of the way of an ambulance or another emergency service vehicle, you can take your time. And it's not always something that feels natural, and time really changes when we're in front of an audience. Like seconds feel like centuries, but getting into the habit of making yourself count to 3, and you'll probably speed up. It probably wouldn't be 3 seconds, but even just 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end, and then moving would make a huge difference to the power in which that you're conveying, in which you're received. Mm-hmm. I love playing with silence. I work it into all my shows. Much to the chagrin of my performers.
There's so much. I talk about it a lot in yoga. Interestingly enough, you'll often hear me say that the pause is as important as the pose. And I think what's really interesting in speech is we often have a fear of that pause, because the pause is really uncomfortable. You hear it a lot in. I watch far too many crime shows. I love a good crime show, yeah. And the ones that I love the most are, when they're in the interrogation room, and the person doing the interrogating quite literally says nothing, and the suspect just fills in the gaps, because we do that quite naturally. We seem to have a kind of inherent fear of silence these days. Maybe because we live in a very overstimulated world. There's so much going on, whether you're watching something on Facebook. I know as we're doing just now, you've got the TV on, there's maybe a phone next to you. There's never a lot of quiet time in our life.
Absolutely. There's so much power in holding silence, and particularly in negotiating situations, and that's very applicable for business or sitting down with lawyers, or if you ever need to do that, don't be afraid of holding the space and sticking to your guns. There's the person that speaks. I mean, I don't mean have silence for 10 minutes or anything, but there's great power in establishing your space, and in negotiating who is going to speak first. Really, really sets the tone. It's something directors and playwrights think about a lot.
How do you bring that into the work that you do? Obviously the majority of what you're doing revolves around singing as opposed to acting. So how do the pauses kind of fit into that?
Well, in opera, we always say the music is our contract. So the musical score is very much our contract, and it is from where I take all of my direction. I'm really studying that text as a primary source and saying, okay, where are the harmonies going? Where's how is the double bass line changing our emotional understanding of the scene, or this character's line of thought, or whatever. Oftentimes there's not, historically, certainly in kind of 17th to 19th century, there's not a giant amount of silence, but you can really use it between acts, before and at the end, and really to allow you to set that atmosphere, and really to set the pace of of the work for the audience. And I really probably took it to its most extreme in my most recent acrobatic show, Viola, which our mutual dear friend Adam Wright choreographed and starred in. And I had Adam, we'd rewritten Twelfth Night through the eyes of the Viola character from Shakespeare's play. And there was one scene in which Adam had just finished a very, very extreme 8-minute acrobatic and aerial. I can't really say extravaganza. It was a movement infused and inspired by what it is like to have a panic attack. So it was very, very, very intense. And it was also extremely, extremely intense physically. And this was coming in minute 35 of a 50-minute show. And for context, most aerial acts are about 6 minutes. So he was doing about 46 to 50 minutes. So I firstly needed to build in time for him to physically recover and not actually have a heart attack. But I also very much wanted to strike the audience. We'd had the soundscape had built up through different lines. I got hired actors and we recorded all the different lines that are said about Viola or Cesario, their alter ego, throughout the play, and our wonderful sound designer Johnny Danziger layered them, and it built to this extreme sound cacophony that our violinist and cellist were improvising off of. So there was just so much sound, so much movement, just incredible stimuli. And then I had it cut. He did this big drop and landed on the floor, and as soon as he landed, everything cut out. And it was just, you could only hear his gasping for a solid minute. And oftentimes in our tour, I stretched it to 1.5 minutes, which is a long time for absolute silence. And it was and the audience were, I got feedback, the audience were uncomfortable about it. Some people loved it, some people really hated it. But that was very much what I wanted, the extremity of everything that we'd experienced in the seconds before really only actualized when it all disappeared and we had this vacuum, and in the vacuum lived Adam as Viola Cesario, and their physical just breaking point that we could see on the stage in front of us. So I love playing with that concept of the extreme and really pushing the artist and the audience to really experiment with how they're experiencing work. And you know, there's a famous, in the nerdy classical music world, piece by John Cage called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And this is to take this to an extreme. And on the music, there is just one bar, and it says tacit, which means to hold, means silence. So effectively, you could do it with an orchestra, you could do it with a singer, you could do it with a pianist. They would come to their instrument and they would open it, and they would sit there and they would count for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And the audience, and it's about trying to force the audience to confront the sound around them. And many people hate that. They, you know, think it's kind of artsy rubbish, like putting a banana on a shelf and calling it art. And I do understand that critique, I really do. But in short doses, I think there is something powerful about being forced to be in the present moment and interact with what is directly in our sphere of senses. And you're absolutely right. Like we spend so much time either with, if we're watching a film, we'll also be checking our phone or doing other work, or we spend so much time juggling. And I love jugglers, I love watching juggling, but in our own personal existences, again, there's power in just being forced to confront the space and what's in front of us, and frankly ourselves, which the legend of the Ouroboros, the mirror that drove everyone mad, because when you looked in it you saw yourself as you truly are, without the stories that we tell about ourselves, and there's something really powerful in that I think we spend a lot of time not confronting, frankly, and being, but we, as an opera singer, we're forced to do that all the time, and that's why it is such a brutal profession that I'm not sure I would advise anyone to go into. But people say rejection's hard, which it is in any capacity, but particularly as a singer, it's quite literally our voice, our body, our musculature, our whole sense of self that's got to be put on the line for those 3 minutes of that audition. And if you have the famous pieces with the really high note that sounds amazing, and yes, that note is tricky, but that note is all about the setup. It's actually the breath that you take beforehand and the couple, maybe like 3 to 4 notes you sing just before it. It's the setup that counts, but you also need to absolutely commit to that note. And if you don't commit, you'll crack and it will be terrible. Well, you'll live, no one will die, but it feels like death inside. But yeah, you can't shy away from yourself, and you can't shy away from the present moment. You've just got to go for it and hope to God that you did the setup properly.
Yeah.
And then it will work beautifully.
Well, on that beautiful and very yogic notes, you've talked about being present, you've talked about so many things that are relevant in yoga. I think it is the perfect moment to bring our conversation to a close, because I cannot believe it is that time again where we've reached the end of another fantastic Women Talking Wellness. So it remains for me to say a massive thank you to Charlotte for sharing her time this evening, for sharing her stories, her humour, and I think just for being a wee bit inspirational tonight. I hope you agree with that. Now, if you want to hang out a bit more with Charlotte and I, we are going to be running a retreat in the stunning countryside of Lithuania in August 2021. This was supposed to happen in 2020. It did not, but we are not deterred. We have not been dissuaded. We are going to be running in 2021. Now, bookings are going to open up in January, and we've got a crazy generous early bird offer, so look out for the details. We're going to get back to nature, connecting body and voice to find that inner warrior and let them radiate from you. So if this is something that you're interested in, then feel free to drop me a DM or an email, and just look out for the details, because all of it is going to be released very, very soon. Make sure that you snag your spot. Come hang out with us. I have had so much fun introducing some incredible speakers to you and being able to interact with people who are doing amazing work. These are inspiring women who are leading the way towards a world where we get to make choices out of love and not fear. None of us knows what 2021 is going to bring. I mean, I know we're all hoping that it's like, oh, please God, let it be an easier ride than 2020, right? But you know what? If it wasn't for everything that's happened over the last 8, 9, nearly 10 months, I probably wouldn't be sitting here now. I wouldn't be having these incredible conversations. I'm loving what they've introduced to my own life and how I've been inspired, motivated at times. I've even had a bit of a wake up call, and I can only hope that you've had similar experiences. So, thank you to you for being a part of the conversation, for choosing to interact, to comment, to show up. And I'm so excited about the possibility that's to come in the new year. So that's it for now, folks. And I can't wait until the next time we get to hang out together. Have a great evening. Oh my God, before we finish, Charlotte, Are you up for singing a bit of?
Well, we didn't
So
practice it for no reason.
there's
Hopefully I can remember.
there's one tiny little addendum to our to our show tonight, and that is a conversation that was had on, I think, Tuesday evening about thunder snow, a phenomenon that happened in Edinburgh earlier. I think, was it this week or at the end of last week? And one of our practitioners said she can't hear the word thunder snow without thinking of Queen. Well, Charlotte has very kindly said that she is going to sing the line with thunder snow in it. I'm gonna, Charlotte, it is over
Well,
to
I was
you.
trying to work that. Yeah, in hindsight, I couldn't quite work it into my conversation about breath. But
Wouldn't that have been cool?
thunder, snow, and lightning, very, very frightening me.
Woo! Oh, that has absolutely made my night, and I hope it's made yours. Thank you.
We can put more Queen in the retreat. It's okay. There's full time. I'll take requests.
If you want more,
see, if you're an
Queen,
early bird, then you can make such requests. So I mean, that's the real.
Is that what we're gonna do? We put it out there. If you want more Queen requests, you've got to book early. Oh my God! Rachel says, "Yeah." Amy says, "Awesome." Guys, have a great evening. I will speak to you soon. Take care.